Hey Atlanta, say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right, we're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/smallbusiness or visit an Apple store to learn more.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It's an open line Friday here at the Eric Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am happy to have you. As always, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. You get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast. I do have to mention this to you. Yesterday, I sent out an email asking people to update their information if they want to be one of the activists. And a lot of people replied to me and said, I got this email from you. Is it spam? No. It's real. It's real. But if you just text the word Army to 33777, you can go in and click your, put your information in. We're using a new site to be able to generate action items and activist information for you. So, there you go. It would be worthwhile for you to text Army to 33777. Well, there's been some level of panic and chagrin among Republicans for the last several weeks as Donald Trump has tried to find a message and Kamala Harris has been able to redefine herself. But even members of the media are now starting to say, wait a second, is this it? Probably not good. And, well, it doesn't help that you've got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on stage together rallying for Kamala Harris, and this comes up.
2 years ago, as vice president, I was proud to cast the tie-breaking vote that sent the bill that gave Medicare the power to negotiate and let it get to the president's desk, and I was proud when our president, Joe Biden, signed that bill into law.
You know, she was the tie-breaking vote for the stimulus plan, too. Things haven't gone so well. Now she wants price controls in this country. This is Donald Trump finding his message.
Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect. But it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger, dramatically more inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act, by the way, was a disaster. It's what caused the inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act was a con job. They actually admitted that it wasn't really for inflation that they did it. They don't know why they did it, but they named it the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a very nice name. Got approved based on that. Unfortunately, people didn't understand it. I understood it. I said that's going to cause tremendous inflation, and it did, among other things like energy. She's running on the Maduro plan. We call it the Maduro plan, like something straight out of Venezuela or the Soviet Union. This announcement is an admission that her economic policies have totally failed and caused really a catastrophe for our country, and beyond that, a catastrophe in the world.
Catherine Rampell is a progressive columnist and business writer at the Washington Post. Her headline today, when your opponent's calling you communist, maybe don't support price controls. Yeah. So here's the issue. Kamala Harris now has two plans. One is she wants price controls. Now, notice, price gouging wasn't a thing. They provoked inflation, and instead of acknowledging inflation, they said it was price gouging. blaming business, not government, but also now her second plan is Kamala Harris says she wants to give every first-time home buyer $25,000 for a down payment. Progressives are out there praising the plan, saying, well, economics is very, very complicated. You can't really say that this is going to hurt the economy. Actually, the basic economics isn't that hard. The supply-demand curve, all that, it's actually not that hard. There are complicating factors of macroeconomics, but at the household level, economics isn't that hard. As prices go up, you tend to cut back. As prices go down, you can spend more. I can tell you how the $25,000 is going to play out, because there is a basic rule in economics that as the government subsidizes something, prices go up to capture the fair market value of the good being sold and the subsidy. So if you give everyone a $25,000 check to buy their first home, the price of the average home in the country is going to rise by $25,000. She'll say it's price gouging, but it's not price gouging when individual Americans selling their homes individually, all together, without talking to each other, raise the value of their home by $25,000. It's a natural side effect of subsidies. For example, electric cars would be cheaper than they are long term if the government did not subsidize their purchase. By subsidizing the purchase of an electric vehicle, the prices of electric vehicles have gone up. And by the way, people predicted with the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a green jobs bill, that with the government subsidies for new battery-powered vehicles, the price of the battery-powered vehicle would go up. It did, almost by as much as the subsidy. This is Economics 101. Again, in a fair and free market, which we don't really have right now, particularly under Biden, but in a marketplace, if the government subsidizes a good or service, the price will go up by the amount of subsidy to capture both the fair market price and the subsidy, to maximize the return for the seller. Any basic good economist will tell you that's the truth, and anyone who doesn't is lying to you. On top of that, you're incentivizing a bunch of people who can't save to be able to make their purchase. On top of that, for a first home, they need $25,000 from the government. They really need 20% down. So good luck with that. You're going to find yourself a $100,000 house, basically a $125,000 house, really, in America right now under the Biden-Harris regime. Also, it's going to cause a rush. It's going to shorten supply. Kamala Harris wants to use the government to provide builders the means to build more houses. She wants the government command and control. This isn't even socialism. This is communism. It's the communists of the Soviet Union, of Cuba, of North Korea, of China, who provide the means and wherewithal to engage in the economy. It's the communists who command and control. They set prices on goods. They're the ones who buy the materials for the home builders and subsidize the cost of the home builders to build homes, which, by the way, are never good. The home builders cut corners to save money. But I need you to understand something here that's really important. You and I can say this is communism or socialism. But what it actually is the product of two people, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, who haven't had a real job. They've had jobs, and to them and to you and me, objectively looking at them, okay, they're real jobs. But they're government-funded jobs. Kamala Harris makes a big deal about working for McDonald's when she was making her way through school, but she hasn't had a job in the private sector since then. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both have lived off the taxpayer dime since they got out of school and started working. They have no private sector experience. They haven't had to worry about budgets and income and revenue and expenses because they're on the government dime. They can just raise taxes, bring in more money, get more money from the government. They don't live in the real world that you and I live in, where we have payrolls and budgets and limits. They can just print dollars and get more money with the government. And this thinking is proud. It's so bad, actually, that Barack Obama's former economist is out saying, I hope this is just a talking point And she's not really serious about this. Barack Obama's own economic advisor is out there saying, I hope this is just for show. It's not actually a smart plan in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of remarkable that we're at this point where even the New York Times is saying, actually, progressive economists say this is all a bad idea. Got a realtor who listens. He writes, look at the foreclosure list. Down payment assistance from the city of Atlanta and how many are in foreclosure each month. They won't learn. They'll just buy, then foreclose, bringing down the markets. Yeah, the city of Atlanta gives down payment assistance. And when you look, the majority of houses in foreclosure in the Fulton County area are those that got government assistance. Look, if you're not disciplined enough to save up the money for a down payment, the government giving you a down payment is not going to instill that discipline. There's a quote I saw yesterday that if you can't live on a budget with $100,000 a year, you're not going to live on a budget with $1 million a year. This is the product of not working in the private sector. These are the economic plans of the ignorant. Emotionally, they sound good. And progressives governed by emotion get very emotional about, oh my gosh, the government's going to give me $25,000 to make a down payment on my first home. How great is that? What are the strings that come with it? Forget everything else. What are the strings that come with it? When you decide to get out of the house and turn around and sell it, what strings will come with it? We don't know. But also what we do know is that you're going to pay more for your house than you otherwise would because of this. Not only that, if it incentivizes young purchasers to go out and buy their first homes, there's going to be a run on first home buying, which is going to drive up the price generally, which is going to cause shortages. All of these things are obvious. Basic economics is not hard. You have a supply curve and you have a demand curve. And the supply and demand ultimately align for a price point. When you add a subsidy, it shifts the supply and demand curve. Why? Because it increases demand, decreases supply, so it drives up prices. And the price will be set based on the subsidy plus the fair market value. This isn't hard. But it's hard when you've never had a real job in the real world and you've always lived on the taxpayer dime. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are essentially welfare queens. They live on the taxpayer dime. They may purport to have jobs as vice president or as a prosecutor, or as a senator, or as a governor or a former teacher, but they're getting their money from you, the taxpayers. They've never been accountable outside of the government. And government accountability, we all know how that works. Look at the Secret Service. When you have the liberals in the Washington Post and the liberals in the New York Times saying, wait a second, this isn't a good idea, it should be a big red flag, but the Harris team is doubling down on this stuff. Here's Donald Trump again.
2016, we got millions of more from 10 to 12 million votes more. Think of that. No president has ever gone with that kind of an election uptick. Usually a president will get less. President Obama got less, much less, his second time, but he won. But he got much less. We got 10 to 12 million votes more, and that's not including other votes that we can talk about at another day. But this is their votes, 10 to 12 million more. And we left, and that's when all the problems started. We didn't have these problems. We would have never had a problem with Abdul. We would have never had a problem with anybody, frankly. And I'd have to say, you're looking at things behind me, and they did a nice job. Wow, I haven't gotten to see. That's good. I don't like the tags very much. Look at that, up 46% eggs. Wow. Up 65%. Wow, school lunch is up 65%. How can a family afford that? But look at this over here. What a nice job. I think I'm going to take some of them back to my cottage and have a lot of fun. Like the Cheerios. I haven't seen Cheerios in a long time. I'm going to take them back with me. Bacon is through the roof. They're all through the roof. The milk, everything is bad. And we're going to straighten it out. We're going to bring prices way down, and we'll get it done fast. And with her, it's just talk. She's a radical left San Francisco person who destroyed the place. And I don't know. It's hard to believe that she can even be in the discussion. They had a group of 12 people that she was considering, and they put her name in there, and they marked them, who were the best and who were the worst. And she was actually rated the worst of the 12. They had 12 plus her, 13 people, and they rated her the worst. Now, 6 weeks ago, she was considered to be a failed vice president and a failed administration, a disaster. And now all of these people are talking about her like she's Margaret Thatcher, liberal version. She's not smart. I don't believe she loves our country. And we cannot have our country destroyed, because once that happens, it'll never be able to come back. Okay?
Rambling from Trump to some degree, but focusing on prices and groceries and Maduro and Harris's plan. Again, what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are proposing are bad economic policies that even Democrats who are in the private sector say this won't work, not at a philosophical level, but at a practical economic level. The only reason they came up with them is because they've never worked in the private sector. They have no idea how the economy works for us, which explains everything as well about the Biden administration, which disproportionately has people advising him who come from nonprofit world and government, not the private sector. If you want the private sector to survive, Kamala Harris needs to lose.
Way to eat a tea. You're listening to an ad for PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and The Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high-quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and The Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
Greetings, it is Eric Erickson here in the phone number open line Friday, 877-973-7425. Got a short segment here, so stand by. I'll get to you after the bottom of the hour. Right now, though, you know, Dave McCormick was at the gathering on this past weekend, and I commented on his ad campaign against Bob Casey and Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania. And he says it's actually like a young guy in his early 20s on his team has found all these videos, compiles them for TV, and gets them to the ad guy. So it's like a 20-something who's finding this stuff and putting together these ads. And he's got another one, and these are so much better than what's coming from the Trump team. It's like, can you loan this kid to the Trump team?
They just passed a $2 trillion spending bill
filled with bailouts and poor.
The vice president votes in the affirmative.
We're not looking at a contribution to inflation, but actually we're going to get prices down.
The risk of inflation is pretty low. The risk of inflation is pretty low. I would err on the side of something too big.
Food, energy, rent prices skyrocketing.
Larry Summers and others came out and said it was too big for the moment.
I don't know any economist that was recommending something the size that what was done.
He made a bold proposal there, $1.9 trillion. And you know what, Neil, I'm glad to get.
We did the right thing in the rescue plan by going big. Go big or go home.
People go to the grocery store, they can't afford to eat, and you can't afford to put gas in your car to go to work.
I mean, everything's going up except, paychecks.
It wasn't like that before Biden took over.
Bidenomics is working. It's working.
We've delivered over and over again.
The risk of inflation is pretty low.
That is called Bidenomics.
Such a good ad. Well done to the McCormick team. I got to tell you guys, talking about well done, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm is well done. It just works. It is a small, hold it in the palm of your hand air purifier. It gets rid of dust, it gets rid of pollen. But where it really shines is an odor eliminator. Dirty diaper odor, dog odor, litter box odor, cooking musty odors, you name it. It wipes them out, and you get 3 of them for less than $200. You save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. That's the website. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. Pure as the driven snow. Deals. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3, no space. You'll get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms for less than $200. You'll save $200, and you'll start wiping out odors. You can plug it up with a USB cord. You can plug it up into the wall, and it packs a wallop. It gets rid of the smoke odors. It gets rid of the litter box odors. I travel with one in my travel bag because if you're in a hotel room or rental car where someone smoked, it wipes out those odors. It does a great job. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. It is Open Line Friday. I'm Eric Erickson. The phone number to the show is 877-973-7425. Before I get to your phone calls, I'm going to give you your nightmare. I saw this story and I cringed at first and I've been laughing about it ever since. Dr. Iswari Prasad was placed on probation by the Florida Board of Medicine and is required to pay a $7,500 fine after issues with 2 colonoscopy procedures he supervised, including one involving a screaming patient. Prasad. I shouldn't be laughing at this. I'm so sorry. Prasad, a Florida gastroenterologist, wasn't wearing his hearing aids during the 2 colonoscopies. He couldn't hear the patient screaming. He wasn't sufficiently sedated and started screaming during the colonoscopy, and the guy couldn't hear him. Where were the nurses? Where were the nurses? The complaint stated that during the first colonoscopy, Prasad improperly delegated a surgical technician, someone without a medical license, with the task the individual should not have performed. Citing the complaint, the Miami Herald noted that Prasad started inserting the scope before the patient was completely sedated during the second colonoscopy, and the patient began yelling. He's been licensed in Florida since 1990, will not be allowed to perform any gastroenterology procedures on his own until evaluated by the University of Florida Assessment Program, and performs at least 10 gastroenterology procedures under the supervision of another physician. 5 of the medical procedures must be colonoscopies, and the 10 procedures must be spread over 5 days. And you know, and I know, someone right now is hearing this story saying, me, I want to sign up for this guy's colonoscopy. My gosh, he didn't have his hearing aids on. Oh my gosh. Okay, I shouldn't be laughing at that. I'm sorry. We're all going to have nightmares now. I pity those of you headed into colonoscopies. If your doctor is hard of hearing, please ask your doctor to turn up the hearing aids just in case there's something going on. Okay, I got to move on now. How do you do that without a hearing aid on? Okay. Oh, boy. So, let's go first to Chad, calling from Montgomery, Alabama. Chad, how are you?
I don't know how I follow up with that, you know?
I don't think you can.
The rectum damn near killed him. You know?
All right, we better move on before we get ourselves in trouble.
So you were talking about how government money distorts markets, and I want to talk about a current issue, and that is the increase in the delinquency rate of car notes. Can be tied directly to the COVID money that everybody got back in 2021. Everybody went out and bought F-150s, $1,000 car payments, distorted the market, raised the price of vehicles through the roof. And now you've gone from a 3.73 default rate at the end of 2022 to a 4.43 default rate, which is almost a 20% increase in default on car notes now. And another example would be how it drove up the price of labor for restaurants and service industry. I had clients, you know, I'm a labor lawyer. You and I have talked about that before. I had clients who couldn't hire anybody after COVID because they couldn't pay the equivalent of the $22 to $25 an hour people were getting to stay home because of COVID money. And these are perfect examples of how government money injected into the system completely distorts and can completely destroy a market. And you probably know plenty of restaurateurs that went out of business because of this.
Yep, sure do. Okay, so one funny story. And by the way, Chad, someone is replying to me on social media about that story that perhaps the IRS can hire that doctor to perform exams for them. So Philip and I were in Las Vegas during COVID. Actually had to go out there. Was not a real leisure trip. We were out there for work. And we went to a steakhouse. And it was taking 30 and 40 minutes to get an Uber to show up anywhere. And we get this Uber, and it's this guy who he was hilarious. And I finally said, I mean, it took him forever to get there. It's like, what's going on that it's impossible to get like a ride share out here? There weren't any taxis driving. There weren't any ride shares. What is is there a huge event? Because this is in the middle of COVID. He said, no, it's not a huge event. He said, nobody's working. He says, people are making more money staying home, getting what the government's giving them than they are working. So, of course, I've got to ask the guy, if that's the case, why are you working? I will never forget this. He says, literally, just very flippantly, he says, I like hookers and steak, and they're more expensive than what the government's giving me. Yeah, I mean, that was his answer. I don't know that he was joking either. I don't think he was joking. But, yeah, he was saying, though, that it was impossible for the taxi companies and the rideshare companies to get people to go back to work because they were making so much money from the government sitting home. There was no reason to work.
And you and I have also talked about the tuition, the college tuition thing, where when the government took over the student loan program, then suddenly the colleges started lending as much as they could. They raised the tuition to meet the rate of the loans that the students could get, which absolutely, I think the tuition costs for college, I think they're like up 45%. Over the last 4 or 5 years. It's insane. It's insane. Anytime the government does that, they distort the market, and people are going to take advantage of it because, we're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yo, you're absolutely right. Look, I appreciate the phone call. Y'all, this is Jason Furman was Barack Obama's chief economist. This is a direct quote in the New York Times today from Jason Furman. Quote, "This is not sensible policy, and I think the biggest hope is that it ends up being a lot of rhetoric and no reality." He's referring to not just her price fixing scheme, but also her down payment for first-time home buyers. This is not sensible policy, and I think the biggest hope is that it ends up being a lot of rhetoric and no reality. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, seriously, this is Abby Phillips on CNN.
She's done this in 3 weeks.
Here's what we can say about what the polls say. The CNN's polls. We try to take the best polls, only the best polls here at CNN. It's basically a statistical tie between the two of them. However, that's better than where Joe Biden was a few months ago. So the race has kind of evened up. But here's one thing. I mean, one of the things that we learned about her policy that she's going to roll out is support for a ban on price gouging. Now, I think reasonable people would ask, what does that mean? What does that really mean? And how is the government going to be involved in it? Here's Noah Rothman in the National Review. He describes this policy as a rank pander to the economically illiterate. And despite the presence of many who fit that description in Congress, they understand that allowing the executive branch to functionally set prices is a brain-dead idea that would only hurt consumers in the long run. I mean, is this just a ploy? Because it sounds kind of like it.
Well, look, if you like it, it's called good policy. If you don't like it, you call it pandering.
But is it
a ploy? Even Abby Phillips on CNN says it sounds like a ploy. And yes, it kind of does. As I mentioned before, I got to know Don Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense. What you might not know is that Rumsfeld was deeply involved in the Nixon and Ford White House. He wound up being Gerald Ford's chief of staff. And he had been a congressman. Nixon brought him in to help him after Watergate and all that sort of stuff. The wheels started falling off. Nixon set up a price control panel. Richard Nixon was the last American president to take price controls seriously. Rumsfeld put a man in charge of price controls you might have heard of, whose name was Dick Cheney. I asked Rumsfeld about that because if you know the history, Nixon wanted the price controls, convinced that price controls would work, and even the White House itself, the White House staff, undermined Nixon's efforts at price controls to the extent that not a whole lot came out of it, and they wound up abandoning the project over time. And so I was asking Rumsfeld about that. Like, Dick Cheney is a free market guy. Why put Dick Cheney in charge of price controls? And he looked at me. We were standing in the National Portrait Gallery, And he looked at me and he pointed and he smiled and says, that's exactly why I put him in charge. Everybody knows price controls are a terrible idea, but you couldn't tell that to Nixon. So I put Cheney in charge of it because I knew Cheney would sabotage it from the inside. The terrible idea that Rumsfeld and Cheney did their best to sabotage Nixon's effort. And even Jimmy Carter rejected the idea of price controls. And along comes Kamala Harris now and says we need price controls. There's a side note here. Remember 2020 and 2022, there was a notable shift in the Hispanic vote over the issue of socialism. They moved right because of their opposition to socialism. Republicans won some seats they otherwise would not have won because Hispanic voters in both 2020 and 2022 decided that they didn't want to support socialism. They had fled countries with socialism. And because they had fled countries with socialism, they knew better than to embrace it in this country and allow it to be expanded in this country. And I think there's a lesson here for all of us on that. If Kamala Harris continues to advance these harebrained schemes because she has no sense of how the real world works, because she's lived on the government dole in her entire professional career, you're going to have people turn against her. And Trump is amplifying that. Not just that, he's amplifying the tip policies and things as well.
The Internal Revenue Service under Joe Biden now wants to crack down on tips in the service industry.
This was a policy of her own administration, and now she's saying, oh, no tax on tips.
Harris is a puppet. She doesn't have one original idea.
How many times did President Trump say this?
Everybody knows this is Trump's idea. He's taken it to the forefront. But look, the media is covering up for Harris, and she's counting on that.
What I think she's doing is looking to copy the Trump plan. The American people aren't stupid. He's been saying this. And Democrats, in some cases, have even said negative things about it.
How does she reconcile that against the policy she's been a part of with Biden-Harris, where they've gone after, haven't they not, with the IRS, things like taxes on tips?
In the past, the vice president pushed for increased taxes across the board to pay for progressive programs. This includes bumping capital gains taxes to 35%, increasing the estate tax.
She is just not able to do much else. I mean, besides steal and plagiarize.
Kamala has no imagination whatsoever, as shown by the fact that she played copycat with no taxes on tips.
Now, that's Donald Trump's latest attack on Kamala Harris. It's an online ad. They're obviously not putting it on TV and radio because it's more than a minute. But the point here is she copied him on the tips thing, and the media's covered for her. Now she's copying Nicolas Maduro and Brezhnev on price fixing and down payments for homeowners. She's just copying other people's policies. It was fine when she copied Trump's. And by the way, the no tax on tip policy is a very popular policy that itself is bad economic policy for a variety of reasons. I should know that, even as I know that I'm going to make some of you mad by saying that. But the price gouging war and the down payments for homes stuff from Kamala Harris is a Leonid Brezhnev scheme from the Soviet Union that exacerbated food shortages. It's just bizarre that she would go down this road, so much so that even the Obama team is calling her out and saying, whoa, rein this in. What I want you to do is go to oldglorybank.com. You can steal this idea from me because it's a great one. They're believers in the free market. Old Glory Bank will not cancel your bank account because you're a conservative. They won't deny your ability to purchase a gun with your debit card. In fact, if you're a gun store, gun operator, gun range, and you need a business you can do business with, a bank you can do business with, they're perfect because they're by conservatives for conservatives. I mean, you know who John Rich is. He's one of the original founders of Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is my bank. They have no fee checking. They have no fee savings. You can get business accounts. You can get custodial accounts for your kids. You can even deposit your cash in Old Glory Bank. They're so innovative, even though they're online. They've got a great app, oldglorybank.com. All you do, go to oldglorybank.com, fill out the form. Takes less than 8 minutes to get a checking account or a savings account with them. I've got both. No fee checking, no fee savings, do direct deposit. It's great. It's easy. They're good people. They're very innovative. oldglorybank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are in the nation, if you're buying a building or building a building, buying a franchise, you need an equipment loan, well, the Frost family at First Liberty can help you. They've been making their own decisions since the 90s, and they're going to be around way longer than your current bank's lender, probably. FirstLibertyGA.com, FirstLibertyGA.com. Call them and see if you're fit for them and they're fit for you. FirstLibertyGA.com. Okay, I want to take John from Tulsa, Oklahoma. John's calling. Welcome to the show, John. How are you?
Great, Eric. Thank you for taking my call. Quick story before I ask my question. Years ago, I curiously requested a colonoscopy without sedation. Two things: I don't recommend it, and secondly, they put a picture of me on the wall there at the hospital. Anyway,
with the label that said psychopath, right?
Exactly. It was not. Let me tell you, it was not pleasant, but it was very interesting, to say the least.
Well, okay, John, side note here. I just got an email from a listener says he's had 2 colonoscopies with no anesthesia. He requests them that way, and he also doesn't like anesthesia or mouth numbing for the dentist. And I replied back to him as like, you might get labeled sociopath in my email from now on.
Well, it was tough, to say the least. Real quick, hypothetical question. If Donald Trump had Ronald Reagan's personality, what would be the state of the race today?
Landslide. I actually do think that Donald Trump would be just blowing it out of the water if Kamala Harris would have no shot if he were Reagan. And you know, it's funny you bring this up, John. I really am glad you called and asked this, because there's a related topic that when we come back in the next hour, I actually want to talk about that particular topic. Not so much Reagan per se, but just the parameters of this particular presidential election, the messaging and the like. Because there is something I think that really needs to be said. And it's actually based on an email from a listener, Chip. I got this morning. Chip from Alaska emailed me, and he was talking about the state of play. You got to tune in for this. But yeah, listen, I think historically Americans like to vote for someone, not against someone. And both campaigns have made the strategic decision that the pool of undecided voters is so small, it's easier to just force them to go for one side by voting against the other side. So instead of giving an affirmative reason of vote for me, you're giving a reason of why you must be with me and not with the other side. I'm going to try to avoid getting myself in trouble when we come back talking about this, because I actually think the strategy for people like my friend David French, who's decided he's voting for Kamala Harris, I actually think if you're disgusted by both sides, the right strategy is to just sit it out and not vote. And there's actually a method to the madness there that I want to explain it to you. Now, I'm not telling you don't go vote. Don't hear me say that. I'm not. I hope that you might, and I hope that you might stop Harris and Walz, because I think that they would be economically destructive, and we're already in economically destructive times. But if you're really disgusted by both campaigns, making yourself decide, you know what, I got to go vote for one to stop the other, I don't think is worth it. But the tie-in to all of this is how absolutely exhausting this whole campaign season is. And every single person out there, I think at this point, is just exhausted and ready for these next 80 days to come and go so we can all take a break. And I want to talk about that. Exhaustion is actually part of their strategy.